It is Sunday, November 28th, and this is the Georgia Gang. Good morning. I'm Russ Spencer, in for Laura Geary. Politics did not take a holiday this week. The Georgia legislature gave final approval to 14 new congressional districts, and people all over the state and on both sides of the aisle are unhappy with the results. Atlanta will choose its next mayor and other leaders in 2 days, and the momentum in the race seems to have changed. And City Hall is gearing up to provide $500 a month, no strings attached, to almost 300 poor families in Atlanta. Is guaranteed income a good idea? Theron, Phil, and Martha are here, and the debate and discussion begin right now.
From the Fox 5 studios, the Georgia Gang starts now.
Well, the ink wasn't even dry on Georgia's new congressional map, and 6th District Democrat Lucy McBath announced her intent to sell her house in Cobb, move to Gwinnett, and challenge fellow Democratic incumbent Carolyn Bourdeaux for the 7th District seat. For Republicans in the legislature, it is mission accomplished. They redrew the 6th from +1 Democrat to +24 Republican, and they make no apologies. Democrats, meantime, are crying foul.
The 6th Congressional District was the most competitive in this state, and the map offered by the Democratic caucus would have kept it that way. But this map makes your intent obvious: to legislatively draw and quarter Congresswoman Lucy McBath and scatter to the four winds all the black and brown voters that put her in office.
The Supreme Court of the United States has said that redistricting is inherently a political process. And I say that without hanging my head or stammering. I mean, you can't take it out.
What the House Speaker says seems undeniable, and so is this. Georgia is a toss-up state. We saw it in last year's presidential election.
I just want to find 11,780 votes, which is one more than we have.
And the U.S. Senate runoffs. But the new map doesn't reflect that even split. It gives the Republicans 9 congressional seats to 5 for the Democrats, increasing the GOP majority by 1 seat, despite an influx of 1 million mostly minority voters since the last census. In a tweet, Lucy McBath said Brian Kemp, the Republican Party, and the NRA will not have the final say on when my work in Congress is done. Carolyn Bourdeaux released her own statement saying the people of the 7th deserve a representative that understands and cares about their needs and has a record of fighting for them in Washington. It is my hard-fought honor to serve the people of Gwinnett and Georgia's 7th District, and I look forward to continuing to do so. Governor Kemp is, of course, expected to sign those redistricting bills, and there's a lot to cover this morning. Let's begin with your reaction to the matchup between 2 rising Democratic stars, Lucy McBath and Carolyn Bourdeaux. Theron, what do you think?
It's really unfortunate, Russ, that we have 2 great members of Congress, 2 women that were forced to make a decision to, unfortunately, have to run against each other. If you look at what Carolyn Bourdeaux said, I mean, she came out right away this week with a list of endorsements, sort of saying, hey, I live in this district, I lived here for a long time, and I know the values and the things that the voters care about. But also you saw Congresswoman Lucy McBath, who made, I think, the best decision she could make. It was a political decision that puts her in a position to, unfortunately, have to have a very, very contested primary. She came out very strong this week as well, Russ, that you mentioned, saying that she's going to move and she's going to run and really blame this partisan redistricting on the Republicans. And so my reaction is that I think that, honestly, as much as we want to try to have democracy in this country, I do think that this Democratic debate is going to be pretty intense in the 7th District. And then also I think we need to find some competitive people to run in the 6th District that was clearly a very fair and diverse district that Congresswoman McBath won a few years ago. But ultimately I think we'll have a good slate of candidates to run in all congressional seats as Democrats.
So, Phil, how gleeful are Republicans at the prospect of McBath and Bourdeaux spending a lot of money against each other?
Well, that's a very happy scenario for Republicans. But I would go back in history a little bit, though. The 6th District has been moving around for the last 20 years. Newt Gingrich used to have the old 6th District, and The Democrats tried to get rid of him by carving up neighborhoods and stretching the district. And this goes on, let's put this in perspective, this goes on in all 50 states. Democrat-controlled legislatures do partisan map drawing of congressional and legislative districts, and so do Republican-controlled legislative states. So this is not anything unusual to the state of Georgia. The 6th district, the population had to be shifted. It shifted into reliably Republican areas. The 7th district is going to be reliably Democrat. That's the way it goes. I think with some of these maps, though, you have basically kept neighborhoods intact. And I would say one more thing. There's been some griping about, oh, how did I get into this district or that district? So-and-so is a Republican, now I'm a Democrat, or vice versa. I would say this to every member of Congress, Democrat or Republican: you're first there to help your constituents. And if you have good constituent service, that really helps you. And it shouldn't make any difference what district you are. If you need help from your member, you ought to be getting it.
All right. Well, Martha, let's get to the bottom line here. And I'd really like all your reaction on this. Whatever your party, something doesn't seem right when one party gets 9, the other gets 5 in a toss-up state. Of course, both states or both parties, as Phil says, do this sort of thing when they have the power to do it. Is it naive to think that there could be a better solution, to this?
Look, I would say 20 years ago, the 7th was also contested by Bob Barr and John Linder, 2 Republicans who got kind of drawn into the same kind of situation by the last Democrats that controlled the maps. I think the founders are looking really smart today because they anticipated, I think, that this was going to be a political process, and it's in the U.S. Constitution that you don't have to live in your district. So I think historically there's a lot there, but I would take a little bit of issue with this characterization of Georgia being a 50-50 state. Yes, it's true that presidentially we voted that way, but for years we voted for Republican presidents while we were still voting for Democratic state house and state legislatures. So what's happening here is, yes, the presidential race was about 50-50, but if you look at the control of the House and the Senate under the Gold Dome, that is not 50-50. It is decidedly Republican. It is less so than it was a few years ago, but they still have the big majority. So I do think that these maps reflect, but there are a couple of problems for Republicans too, and of course we'll talk about that later on. So I think you got to keep this in perspective, and it's not just about the presidential race, it's about all the races.
Well, Republicans certainly have a geographical advantage, but the Democrats perhaps a demographic one. Not all Republicans are happy with this, of course. Marjorie Taylor Greene has complained about Southwest DeKalb being added to the rural 14th district that she represents, and the diverse population in Austell and Powder Springs aren't particularly thrilled to have her representing them either. Some saying they feel disenfranchised. Now, Marjorie Taylor Greene said this is nothing more than a losing strategy that leads into the slow slide of Georgia turning blue. Theron, you take the first shot on this one. What do you think?
Well, I want to go back to something that Martha said, and I respectfully agree with some of the things she said, but also respectfully disagree. Men lie, women lie, numbers don't lie. And in 2020, we saw Georgia elect 3 Democrats: the President of the United States, U.S. Senator Warnock, U.S. Senator Ossoff. And so we are a 50-50 state that I would quite frankly believe geographically has been a blue state for a long time, but until we figured out how to play by the rules that the Republicans put in place and we registered more voters, we were able to win. But as far as the Republicans, I'll leave that up to Phil and Martha to talk about Marjorie Taylor Greene. I don't really want to waste any of my energy or breath talking about her. But I do think that there's enough criticism to go around on both sides. And I know Martha has hinted that there was 2 members of Congress that are sort of upset at how these maps turned out as well. But the last thing I'll say is this, Russ. Elections have consequences. And as a Democrat, I'm not going to get on this show and continue to whine about what has happened. What I'm going to do is that I'm going to raise money. I'm going to organize on the ground and start electing more state reps and state senators who are Democrats. So 10 years from now, when we're in power, we'll draw better maps than the Republican did in 2021.
All right, Phil, who do you think runs as the Republican in the 6th district? Theron was talking about the Democrats having pressure to put up a good candidate. Would it be potentially Dr. McCormick or Karen Handel? What do you think?
Yes, I think that Dr. Rich McCormick almost won the 7th district last time. I think he'll be looking in the 6th district. As was pointed out, you don't have to actually live in the district, although it helps. And you've got Jake Evans and Megan Hansen, who are Republicans that have already announced even before the maps. I'm sure you'll get other people getting in there. So you'll have a Republican primary for the 6th. But I would point out that, yes, like Martha says, Trump lost by, 11,000 some votes in the presidential election last year. But I would remind Theron, let's look at the state of Virginia, a deep blue state. It flipped to the Republicans, all 3 state levels, governor, lieutenant governor, and attorney general. They defeated the Democrats. Why? They did local issues. They talked about education and parental control over education. They talked about this divisive anti-white critical race theory. It has no business. They talked about all local and state issues, and the fact that the Biden administration and the Democrats are really tanking in popularity polls is going to help. Raging inflation, high gas prices, high grocery prices, all this is going to hit next year in Georgia and every other state, and the independents right now are siding with the Republicans. And so I wouldn't say that Georgia is going to be a blue state next year, Theron. I think you've got a fight on your hands.
Well, things can change quickly one way or the other. Remember, it was 2016 that Tom Price and Rob Woodall won the 6th and 7th districts by more than 20% just 5 years ago. So things certainly have changed in a hurry. All right, we'll be back. Coming up, Atlanta voters head back to the polls on Tuesday, those who haven't already. We'll talk about the final stretch for Felicia Moore and Andre Dickens when we come back.
Have a question or comment for the Georgia Gang? Email them at georgiagang@foxtv.com.
Atlanta mayoral races have a habit of coming down to the wire. Ask Mary Norwood, who lost twice by razor-thin margins. City Council President Felicia Moore finished the first round of voting earlier this month, 18 points ahead of Councilman Andre Dickens, 41% to 23%. But polls suggest the race has tightened and Dickens may even have a slight advantage at this point. So let's bring the panel back. Theron, what is behind Dickens's apparent surge? Do you think it's real?
I do think it's real, and I think that what he's doing, Russ, is that he is reaching out to a lot of voters who did not vote for him the first time around. You know, he received the endorsement of Sharon Gay. He's also received a lot of other endorsements, including Ambassador Andrew Young and also current Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms. But if you look at the early vote numbers, Russ, right now, as we are taping before Thanksgiving, at the close of early voting on Tuesday, only about 23,000 people have voted in Atlanta. And so you have one more day of early voting on that Wednesday, which should be a big day, but that's compared to 38,000 people who early voted in the general election on November 2nd. Many of us believe, Russ, that Felicia Moore was able to get her 41 because she overperformed early voting, and that Andre Dickens was able to beat Kasim Reed for the second place spot because he was able to have the undecideds break his way, and he had a huge election day turnout. I believe that that's still the fact today. I do believe that if you look at who is voting and where they're voting in the city of Atlanta, we don't know who they're voting for, but you have to think that that actually benefits Felicia Moore's campaign. However, Andre has displayed that he has the momentum, and I think whoever has the money, which I believe Andre is going to have a lot of it, can he close on election day, and can he bring together the best coalition of voters to be ultimately elected as mayor? So I think this race is going to be very close. While the polls are showing that Andre's got a lot of momentum, Felicia Moore has been steady throughout this entire race, has a lot of support, not just in Buckhead, but all across the city. So I do believe it'll be a tight race on November 30th.
Yeah, let's hope the turnout is better than it was earlier this month. Crime and affordable housing have propelled this race. Phil, what do you think is going to be the deciding factor here?
Well, Russ, I think you've made two key points that are being debated, crime and affordable housing. And the code word for affordable housing in the Dickens campaign apparently is to dynamite single-family housing in Atlanta through zoning. And that's actually hurting not just in the Buckhead business section of Atlanta, but in all sections of Atlanta. The neighborhood planning units are a very good system that's worked in Atlanta, where the neighborhoods can agree or disagree on zoning decisions, that would all go away if Dickens gets his way. And of course, Dickens doesn't want to get a new police chief. Felicia Moore wants to have a nationwide search to get the best police chief to turn things around. Felicia Moore wants to use the jail and house it violent criminals in the city jail, and Dickens wants to close it down. So those are stark contrasts, and I think that crime, especially in the Buckhead area, but in all areas, are going to drive voters. I do agree. I think all three of us agree, Russ, that turnout is the key. And so I do think Theron makes a good point. It'll probably be close. The election is November 30th, and the TV ad wars have been going on all the way up to Thanksgiving, and that's going to have a factor too.
All right, Martha, I'm going to get to you, but Theron, I know you want to jump in on this.
Yeah, just two clarifications with Phil, who consistently comes on the show and advocates for Felicia Moore, and that's fine. That's his choice. But I think we got to be fair to Andre. Number one, Russ, he didn't say that he was going to keep Rodney Bryant. He is going to keep him on as long as he can do his job. He's going to put in some metrics, and he will probably do a search. He's not going to blow up housing in Atlanta. That's not what he said, and I can't even remember the third point that Phil made. So I think, I just want to make sure that our viewers understand that. Go look at these people's records, ask the candidates where they stand on issues, and just don't take Phil's word for it.
Yeah, we talked about the detention centers. As far as, yeah.
Oh yeah. And that's,
well, how long are you going to keep? How long are you going to keep the police chief?
Well,
how long are you going to keep?
He said, Andre Dickens has said he would give him a 100-day contract. Is that right? Isn't that our understanding?
That's what he said. Thank you, Russ. He would put him on a 100-day contract, and whomever, whether it's a current chief or a new chief, if they don't meet those metrics, he would not have them. And definitely, he wants to figure out the best way to create a diversion center for the jail. He's also willing to talk to Fulton County and the sheriff as well. So I just want to make sure we don't mischaracterize his record on the show.
All right, let me get Martha in on this. Martha, how much do you think the Buckhead City question is looming over this race? And do you think that the two shooting deaths this week near Phipps Plaza might be on voters' minds since it's so fresh?
Well, on the early voting numbers, those Buckhead numbers have not been as strong as they were. Runoffs are always tricky things, but I think it will play into it. But I think what's interesting about Andre Dickens is one of the biggest things against him is he was perceived as the defund the police candidate. And I think he has successfully dealt with that issue, and you've seen it reflected in the polls. But I think both candidates, I think it's going to be a very close race. And as both Theron and Phil have pointed out, it's going to be public safety is going to be the number one issue. And if Andre Dickens has been able to successfully fight back that defund the police mantra that he has been kind of saddled with because of some of the votes he took, I think that, he could do better than people think. But I think it's too close to call, and we're going to have to see what happens on Tuesday.
All right, Phil, I'm going to come back to you and give you the last word on this topic.
Well, I do think Martha's making a point on the defund the police vote. I don't know if Dickens is surviving that. I will say that I don't know what a diversion center is going to do. Let's just keep the jail open. And yes, I am in favor, as Theron says, let's work with Fulton County and the other metro police agencies. I would hope both would be smart enough to do that, whoever is elected. But I do think, again, we all agree turnout is going to be the key to see who's going to be the next mayor.
All right. Well, we hope people will tune in to Fox 5 on Tuesday night. We'll have all the results. Coming up this morning, an economic experiment is coming to Atlanta. Guaranteed income for hundreds of low-income residents. We'll discuss the merits.
Join the discussion on the Georgia Gang Facebook page and watch past episodes on the Georgia Gang YouTube channel.
Well, by the end of this year, a pilot project pushed by Atlanta Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms will provide $500 a month to almost 300 low-income individuals and families for 2 years. Now, guaranteed income has been tried elsewhere, notably in Stockton, California, and it comes without any strings attached. Most of it will be paid for with money from the developers of the Gulch downtown. A separate but similar fund will target women in the old 4th Ward. So let's bring the panel back. Theron, this idea is that people living in poverty know very well how to spend money if it's given to them. What do you think?
Well, Russ, you've reported on this for years in Atlanta, and that Atlanta, while we're this wonderful city with this great diversity, and Atlanta is a place where anybody can be whoever they want to be and can succeed, particularly in entrepreneurship, we do have wage stagnation. We do have a high increase of generational poverty in this city, and I think the mayor was right to address this as a problem that a lot of the mayoral candidates talked about. And so this program is a pilot program that has worked in other cities, as you pointed out. I do think that if you can give people an opportunity for money to be received to help their families, let's try it out. And I think particularly the metrics that are going to be put in place to identify who these individuals will be very important. And I just encourage the city of Atlanta, as we're talking about this, to communicate to the public about how this is going to be managed, who's getting the money, and sort of maybe a ongoing sort of report leading up to the 2-year end of this program. But ultimately, Russ, I think it's the right thing to do. We do have a sector of our city that are very poor and that definitely need this assistance.
Yeah, for individuals, I believe the limit is $26,000. For a family of four, $53,000 relative to the poverty level. Martha, this is different, of course, from universal basic income that Andrew Yang campaigned on for president, which would have given money to people irrespective of their income. What do you think about it?
Look, I think it's a bad idea to give the money with no strings attached. I think that, giving money and attaching to it some job training or something like that, because we're in a place right now where there's opportunities to learn a new trade, how to do that. And people are so much better off if they earn their own living than if they're given money. And so I think that the concern I have is it not being attached to anything, and this is an opportunity for us to step in and say, let's do some job training. There are technical certificates you can get in 3 months or 6 months or 9 months that could change the direction of your family forever by the job that you would get. I realize there's some people that can't work, but we have programs for that already. I don't want to seem heartless here, but I think that giving it with no strings attached, where you ought to have at least some accountability to job training or something like that, is a better way to do it.
All right, Phil, I want to save some time for winners and losers, but give me 25 seconds, your take on this. I mean, do individuals know how to spend their money better than the government could tell them?
Some do and some don't, Russ. I think Martha makes a good point. I wish we could attach some job training to that. But, this is why we have pilot programs, like Theron says. I want to see how these people are vetted. I would like to see the metrics.
All right, fair enough. I appreciate it. Winners and losers are next. Please do stay with us.
Time now for the week's winners and losers.
We, of course, have a lot to be thankful for this week. We've got 3 minutes for winners and losers. Theron, you go first.
Well, thank you so much, Russ, and I'm thankful for you and the Fox 5 staff for all their work that they do for us every single week, and definitely thankful for my fellow Fox 5 panelists. Also want to encourage everyone to go out and vote on Tuesday if you have not early voted. I also give a big shout out to my Clark Central Gladiators again. They advanced to the 3rd round, so good luck to you guys. Keep grinding. And then lastly, I want to offer my condolences to the family of LaVoyd Carter, a dear friend of mine who I work with in politics. Unfortunately passed away this week, and so he was a very, very intelligent man, worked very hard, and I definitely want to give my condolences to his family.
We join you in that. Martha, your turn.
I have no losers this week because it's Thanksgiving. I want to tell everybody happy Thanksgiving. But I want to make a winner this week, David Ralston, with this great comment about the maps where he compared not looking at the greater good to being sacked by Jordan Davis, which I thought was a great line to use, and he's a winner. Another winner this week are the founders, because they anticipated that drawing congressional lines were going to be political, and they put in the Constitution that you don't have to live in the district that you represent. But I also want to thank everybody at the Fox 5 team and all the listeners that write me every week. I am very thankful for you.
Well, this program has a lot of loyal viewers, there's no question, and I'm usually one of them in my PJs. Anyway, Phil, forget that, put that image away. I apologize for that. Phil, you're up next.
Well, I will echo my colleagues. Obviously, Thanksgiving is a winner, and all the blessings that we should be counting. And also, it's also the first Advent Sunday on the Christian Orthodox calendar, and that's a winner in my book. Sad to say, the loser, as we look at grocery and gasoline prices, inflation is the loser. Look at this Wall Street Journal headline from just a few days ago. Inflation's at a 31 high, and it's really cutting into the middle class especially. So sorry to end on a sour note.
All right, fair enough. Phil, thank you very much. And we do thank you for joining us. Fox News Sunday is next. We mentioned the Atlanta mayoral race today. Tomorrow night at 7 o'clock, Election Eve, we will have a special report here on Fox 5 going in depth with the two runoff candidates, Felicia Moore and Andre Dickens. We will have extensive interviews with them, not only about crime, but about all the issues that are happening in the city of Atlanta, including whether Buckhead should remain a city, or should become a city, that is, of course. We hope you'll join us for that special report. In the meantime, have a great Sunday, and thank you for being here this morning.
The opinions expressed in this broadcast are those of the panelists appearing in this program.